two reasons. One is to give you something to watch if you happen to have to miss the session. We know that life is chaotic and you might miss a session. You can catch up from the recording. It also gives you the ability to go back if you were there and re-see an explanation of something or check on something. So those will be made available to you probably 24 hours after the session. I do put a little content warning there. We do analyze some road crashes, nothing overly graphic, but just trying to look at what happened so we can prevent them in the future or prevent the severity of them in the future. But if that might disturb you, I just provide the warning straight up front. Okay, over to you, Kathy. Who are you? Thanks,
Ben. So my name's Kathy, and I look after training at System Solutions, and I've been in the road technical training space for far too long now. But basically, I'll be your program moderator and general go-to person for any issues. If you can't make a session, someone's already been in touch with me, they can't make a session, any admin type issues, and I'll also moderate each session. So I'll be your go-to person behind the scenes in case you're having any trouble. Ken's already mentioned you can chat with us in the chat functionality, which many people have already jumped into. And you can choose to chat with everyone. So you select everyone, or you can change it to hosts and panelists if you just want to communicate something to Ken or I. If for some reason the chat's not working for you, there is also a Q&A function, and I will monitor both of those. And if neither of those work for you, just send me an email in the background and I'll jump on that as well. So I think that's probably about it from me. Oh, and yes, you can raise your hand if you would like to be unmuted, and then I can unmute you and you can actually have a chat with us. And I think, Ken, you might get some people to do that throughout the series.
Yeah, there's a couple of little sessions where we will give you the opportunity to share your insights in a site that you're looking at. But we'll get to all of that. But yeah, if you want to talk, pop that hand up. Now, Kathy, as Kathy mentioned there, Kathy's details are here. Make sure you're in contact with Kathy for anything, the admin, logistics of the course, and ensuring that you have access to different systems, which we're about to show you. And that system is Moodle. Kathy, you might as well keep explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Moodle, you've all been sent an email with your login and password. So check your junk in case it's gotten in there, or send me an email and let me know and I can set you up again. But basically you're in the Moodle course for Safe System Assessments, and that's where we'll have the recordings at the end of each session. So I'll load that on there. That's where there'll be a quiz that you'll do at the end of each session as well. There's a copy of the PowerPoint slides that Ken is presenting in there. Any resources, any bits and pieces are all located in there. So you are required to do a quiz, just a short multiple choice 10-question type quiz at the end of each session. And there's a couple of assignments that Ken will run through as well. But basically it's all housed in the one easy spot to find. And for those of you who they've attended university in the last 5 or 10 years, are probably all very familiar with learning management systems.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, and so if you don't have access to Moodle, you need to get in contact with Kathy pretty quickly, because you will need it to successfully complete this course. Okay, and this is me. So Ken Beer, for those I don't know, and my contact details are there. And I'm your go-to person for this course with any questions about technical content and what we'll be covering in that content side of things. I've got my QR to my LinkedIn there. I do like to keep in contact with people on LinkedIn, but also put out some different thoughts around road safety topics. And it's a good way to continue our learning, because it's certainly it's a never-ending learning task, never-ending learning journey we're on in road safety. So let's all continue to share information and things we're doing and the like. So please connect with me there, and all my contact details down here. And one important aspect of this course is that we do sort of offer that one-on-one coaching or advice as we're ticking along. So at any point you can give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can set up a one-on-one Zoom or meeting and go through some of the content if you're struggling. There's a couple of other little things associated with this course. One is Wally the Wombat. And that is Wally the Wombat there. Is Wally the Wombat warning sign. Your task throughout each of the modules is to count the number of times you see Wally, because that will be one of the quiz questions. It's to try to make sure that you're concentrating on the content of the course rather than doing those emails on the side or designing that roundabout that you're working on. You will see Wally, and just keep a track of how many times Wally appears for each module, and then answer that in the quiz. This doesn't count. That's just a representation of what you will be looking for, and we'll go from there. We also like to give out some prizes, and how do you get prizes? Well, you win prizes by answering the questions that I ask in the chat. So being the first to correctly answer is usually the one that gets the prize. If you do ask some really good questions by the chat or putting your hand up, you will get a prize. If you volunteer to talk through your case study, you're likely to win a prize. And also, a little incentive to get you logging in a little bit early. We just do some trivia in the three or so minutes leading up to the start of the module. And it could be general knowledge trivia, it could be road related trivia, traffic engineering, road safety trivia, and lots of prizes to give out in that. So lots of chances to win prizes. How do we get those prizes to you? Well, when you successfully complete the course, Kathy grabs a prize from the prize pit behind her and puts it in an envelope with your certificate and sends it off to you. And is a calculator a prize, is it?
No.
No, that was just sitting on your desk.
That's a relic from the, that's from, actually, what could be a prize is I found another relic from my earlier days. Look at this, a blackberry.
A blackberry. Wow, extinct species there. Yes, so that's why Kathy's background is the prize pit, because she will be our prize giver awayer. And it's always a bit of a surprise what will turn up in your envelope. But yeah, get active. I mean, these are all tricks we're trying to use to get you engaged in this online format. So you'll be hopefully asking questions, answering questions, doing little polls. And of course, we have assignments and things to get you out on site. We'll cover that shortly. We do set a competency benchmark for this course. We require you to achieve a certain level of understanding about safe system assessments. And so there's some just gateways that you need to pass through, and that's attending 4 of the 5 live webinars and viewing that one that you haven't been able to make. Of course, we'd love you at all 5 of 5. Now, if for some reason things go really crazy in life and you go beyond that, get in contact with Kathy and have a chat about some options there. Satisfactory completion of all the tasks we set, and then we've set this benchmark at 80% for pass marks on quizzes and assignments. And so your assignments will be marked. The quizzes obviously are marked. Now that stresses some people out because it's a pretty high benchmark, but a few things here. You get 3 attempts at everything, and you get this one-on-one coaching if you need. Also, there's nothing we'll be asking you to do that hasn't been covered in the course content. So if you're engaged and listening and actively participating, you shouldn't find this too hard. But I do say always that if you don't get 80%, it's a fail on me as well as you. And so I'm incentivized to ensure that that doesn't happen. So if you don't do so well in your first attempt at something, let's have a chat about it. Let's go back to the content. We'll talk it through. We'll work these things out. I really just want to ensure that everybody coming through this course does understand the fundamentals that we're trying to get across. Okay, so Kathy, before I jump onto that next one, anything else that we need to cover? Anybody pop your questions in about the admin logistics of the course as we're ticking along? I suppose one thing I do also say is that don't wait until I say any questions to type your questions in, because inevitably the time taken to type and I'll have moved on. And so as something pops into your head, jot it down, because Kathy monitors that in the background. And if I do cover it, then Kathy just won't feed that to me as a question. So yeah, just jot ideas down, and feel free to just jot down insights, things that you've noticed or the like, to share that with the group. A bit of conversation behind the scenes is always good.
Absolutely, Ken, agree. Go keyboard warrior on me, people. You've covered everything off lovely, Ken. Just for everyone to get a bit of a sense of where people are from. In this group, we're all up and down the eastern seaboard. So from the very top, north of Australia and Queensland, all the way down to Tasmania is where we have participants from in this series. And we'd also like to acknowledge the traditional landowners. We're on Wurundjeri country here, but obviously we've got people coming from, yeah, all up and down the eastern seaboard today and throughout the series. I think that might be everything at the moment. Okay.
Well, let's get into some content, but if anybody does have any questions, I'll contact you, Kathy, either in the chat as we're live, or via an email or a call. Okay, so I want to, first of all, sort of set a scene, because I do often get asked this question, you know, what is a safe system assessment in the scheme of things? Because a lot of people have heard and know road safety audits, and either they are a road safety auditor, maybe some of you have done the road safety audit course with me. I run that one as well. And I know certainly from the list, some of you are very experienced auditors and really into that process. And so road safety audits are that independent assessment of transport projects looking to improve safety, as safe system assessments are. And we also have, I suppose, design reviews. Now, design reviews are that when you do a road design or an intersection upgrade design or the like, and you hand it over to a colleague and they review it. They didn't do that design, but they're reviewing, are the calculations right? Are the assumptions right? Those sorts of things. And there is overlap between road safety auditing and design reviewing. Certainly there's stuff that sits outside each of those. And I won't go into the details of that. I talk a bit about that in the road safety audit course, and I'm sure many of you are quite aware of that. Safe system assessments sort of overlap both of those a bit. It's a little bit less design sort of reviewing, I suppose. Quite a bit of the road safety audit stuff is covered, and then little bits sit outside. But there's a fair bit outside here that is not covered in a road safety audit or a design review that a safe system assessment will cover. And it could be the way that things are presented or the like. Not just, are you looking for different aspects? We have safety and design, and that's really, can this new infrastructure be built safely, be managed safely, be decommissioned safely? And so lots of sort of occupational health and safety aspects of it, as well as sort of user safety aspects as well. And then DDA, the Disability Discrimination Act, and called sort of different things in different jurisdictions, but generally it's that sort of independent assessment. Can the facility be used, excuse me, by all road users safely? Sorry. And that's, people with vision impairment, wheelchairs, others, just ensuring that everybody can use it and use it safely. Now, there's a bit of overlap there with a few of them, but I'll dig into that a bit more detail. But I thought straight off the bat, that's a good thing to just put forward. Of course, keep your questions coming in. If you had questions on that, happy to jump into those. But I'm going to run through a little bit of content, then I'll ask you some questions, get you to do a few little activities. Yeah, we'll give out some prizes. We will take a little break about halfway through this, just a quick stretch break, fill up your water break, and that'll be about halfway through. Okay, so module 1. We really want you to be able to list principles and elements, or pillars, as some people call them, of the SAFE system. We'll talk a lot about kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types, so how much energy is involved in these crashes and how much can we handle as humans. We'll talk about differences between the traditional approach to road safety and the SAFE system approach. We'll look at best practice in behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions, and we'll talk a fair bit about speed and why it's so critical to the SAFE system. Now, I'm going to be nice to you here. That is a Wally. Your Wally count should be 1 now. That's all the help I give you for finding Wally. Okay, so the SAFE system. The SAFE system is the philosophy under which all jurisdictions in Australia are operating as their way to try to address road trauma. And you'll see that stated in all of the road safety strategies and action plans, some of these up and running, and you'll see SAFE system assessments mentioned in a number of these. There's a few newer ones coming out, and there's this real sort of understanding that the SAFE system is the best practice way to operate in terms of the philosophy of road safety. And the SAFE system's actually been around quite a while, and I'm going to talk to you about that. But the SAFE system, this is one of the early diagrams. And in fact, Kathy, I think I'll give out a prize for the person who can tell me what year the federal government, Australian government, committed to the implementation of the SAFE system. So pop your guesses into the chat. You're nothing, you don't lose points or anything. I should say, as you're guessing, none of the questions I ask or the polls or things that happen in the course you're marked on. It's only the stuff after the course you're marked on. So you're free to just guess and throw ideas out there. So, we might have lost Kathy.
Oh, no, you haven't lost me. Sorry, I was just excited because we have lots of guesses and people can probably work it out that you can just type in year after year after year and eventually you'll get it right. But Reese has got it with 2004. Is that right?
That's right. Well done, Reese. It's a 2004. That's interesting, isn't it? Because there are, a lot of people out there that sort of see the SAFE system as a new concept. And 2004, it's been around quite a long time. And it's just taking, I suppose, a fair bit of time to integrate across lots of jurisdictions and in the practice of work we're doing. And then sort of the development of tools like the SAFE system assessment framework, which enable us to sort of really take a philosophical concept and make decisions on the ground. So I actually want to talk about this older diagram because it tells a few things and how we've moved to some of these diagrams, which you might recognize. But this original old diagram, don't worry if you can't read the details of it, but right in the middle of it is human tolerance to physical force. Okay, they're starting to talk about what we call biomechanics of injury, like the amount of force that humans can handle before they break. All right, and then around that, there was these pillars or elements, depending on how you want to term them, safer speeds, safer vehicles, safer roads and roadsides, and a circle around that. And that was actually all that the SAFE system was being put forward as. So it was about 2002 and 3 as it was being nutted out. And it was just saying that we will create a system there using the speeds, the vehicles, the roads and roadsides that accounts for the biomechanics of the human body and manages forces around that. And that was it. And then somebody sort of said, what about like road user behavior? You know, the drivers, the riders, the walkers, and all what they're doing and their responsibility. And then it sort of divided this camp, right? The two camps came out. And one was the camp of, you know, this is integral, road user behavior and appropriate use of, and, you know, being alert and compliant is so important to road safety. And there was another camp that said, no. Humans are just horrible at doing that, alert, compliant, making good decisions. But we have to create a system that takes all of that into account. The fact that humans will fail, and they'll fail a lot. And our system shouldn't punish their failure with death or serious injury. You know, other punishments and different things are okay. But anyway, so then, you know, in this debate, there was a lot of people, I suppose, who did sort of resonate back to some sort of personal accountability and these sorts of things. And so this little bit was added: alert and compliant road users as this square over the top of the system. Now, I suppose looking back, we all see that as a bit of a failure, because it's an absolute get out of jail clause, or just every time things happen out there on the system, you can go, well, you know, the driver wasn't alert, or the driver wasn't compliant, or the pedestrian wasn't alert or compliant. You know, it's so easy to blame, and we're trying to remove that from our operation of the road system, and trying to create that system where we don't condone any behaviours on the road system that are inappropriate or the like, but we acknowledge that that will happen. And we create that system that means that that doesn't result in death or serious injury. And so you'll see the evolution of diagrams of the safe system, or representations of it, that is has better accounted for this. And I'm going to use this one, which is one that Victoria has used, and it's a fairly simplistic one, which helps for the training session. But in this one, you'll see there's still that human bodies are vulnerable component, you know, biomechanics of injury. But here you see people make mistakes. It's actually spelled out loud and clear. People will make mistakes. We're going to do everything we can to minimize the mistakes people make, but they are still going to make mistakes. That is part of being human. Okay? And we need to then understand how we can manage a system to cater for those mistakes that still make it through. And this shared responsibility, which really also, I suppose, links with that, where we're saying, okay, we want road users to do the best they can in terms of the pedestrians, the cyclists, the motorcyclists, the drivers, everybody, you know, doing the best they can. But no matter what happens out there from an individual road user's decisions or behavior or the like, we are still responsible. As in, we, the system designers, are still responsible for the outcome. Now, that really can make people uncomfortable. And that is a fundamental shift in our thinking in road safety, because, and I spent the early parts of my career doing crash investigations, fatality investigations, reviews. And you would basically go out there to look for what the road user did wrong. Okay? Now, sometimes we link that to that the road misled them, like deceiving roads and, you know, and the like. So, you know, the signs may have looked like the road went straight ahead when it actually turned, or you know, something like that. So that's when the road would contribute. But there was so like the overwhelming majority of the crashes out there were easily pegged back to inappropriate behavior, inattention, misjudging something they should have judged, failure to give way, bad choice on a gap, pedestrians intoxicated, staggering onto the road. Right? All of these things, pretty much all of the crashes out there, you can attribute something like that. And then, sort of, it's easy to push back and say, well, people need to get better at driving. You need to stop getting intoxicated and walking on the road. But this shared responsibility bit challenges that. And it says, well, okay, we don't condone that activity, but how do we create a system that when that happens, it doesn't result in death or serious injury to any of our community? And the levers we have to do that are the vehicles that are out there and the safety features in the vehicles and the advancements in technology, the roads and the roadsides, the speeds at which we're traveling, and the road users themselves still. We can get better outcomes. So that's what we're going to run through sort of briefly, but I do want to, I suppose, take you on to a different journey in a second, in another industry completely, because it sometimes helps us to jump out of our industry and look at some other industries. But when we think about key principles of the safe system, some fairly fundamental ones and pretty universally accepted. There's always people tweaking and making new little bits and pieces and adjusting, but the principles we're talking about is an aspiration of no death or serious injury. And it is an aspiration. We know it's not going to happen in the next 2 years, 5 years. But we are aiming for that, and our decisions that we make should be aiming for that as well. Not just we'll improve it by 5%. We should be actually aiming for that step change and making decisions accordingly. We talked about people making mistakes, shared responsibility, and people are vulnerable, which is vulnerable being that term for biomechanics of the human body and our tolerances to physical force, which we are going to analyze in some detail. Okay, I'm going to jump out of road transport. I'm going to jump into another industry and give you an analogy, and then we'll get into some a little activity for you to get involved in. But I'm going to go to manufacturing, the manufacturing of widgets, for example. Now, back in the day, widget manufacturing, or manufacturing in general, factories, were fairly open system. And by open, I mean that a lot of different people came in, did work, and you've got kids there in that photo, but you had others came in to do different jobs, and it was well known that it was dangerous in factories, and the factory owners and the managers would tell people who are coming in to clean the machines or do a certain task, this is dangerous, and you've got to make sure you're safe about it. Okay, don't put your hand in here, don't do this, don't go in this area, and they pat them on the back and say, it's up to you to protect yourself. That's what we call a pathological safety culture. That then goes up after a while, and it goes into this reactive safety culture where they eventually start to say, well, yeah, we've said that machine is dangerous for a while now. Can we do something about it? Can we fix that? Can we make it less dangerous? Can we put a guard on it so it stops ripping kids' arms off when they're trying to clean it? And can we maybe put a fence around this bit so actually people can't get close to that crushing mechanism or whatever it is? And so as these problems arise, people go out and fix them. And that's what we call a reactive safety culture. It's the next step up the safety ladder. Then the economists get on board, and they analyze the factory and they look at how much lost productivity, lost time there is in terms of widget production because machines were down, because they were pulling bits of bodies out of them, how much payout they had to make to the family of workers that have been killed or injured, and these sorts of things, and they calculate that out, and then they say, well, actually, if we could invest £10,000, pounds back in these days, £10,000 in safety improvements, it'll actually return you £30,000 in more widget production. And so they give it a term of a benefit cost ratio. Back in the day, a newfangled thing. We all have heard of that now, and benefit cost ratio of 3 to 1 there. So every pound invested returned £3. It's good economic sense to start investing in safety. And that's what we call a calculator. Then we go into what we call the proactive safety culture. And this is where an incredibly high level of safety is demanded. And widgets can be produced up to that level, but it must stay within that incredibly safe bounds that we've set. And it sets the precondition. Safety level sets the precondition for any widget production. And then you have to heavily invest in maintaining that whole safety culture. And that's across maintaining your actual machinery and everything like that, but also maintaining the culture and the understanding and knowledge and the like. And so that's our general safety culture ladder. And when we look at the road transport system, I mean, where do we sit? And you've seen there that I've used mobility in a few spots instead of widget production. But where do we sit? Well, the answer to that is probably across quite a few of these. There's definitely pathological elements to our road system where we, license 17, 18-year-olds, pat them on the back, say, it is super dangerous out there and you've got to protect yourself. We definitely get into reactive black spot type treatments. We do a lot of benefit cost calculating. I'm sure many of you have written business cases or analysed things in a BCR sense to work out whether it's worth it to invest in saving lives for the community and preventing serious injury. But we do have some proactive elements. We're seeing some more of it, and some of the great work in different jurisdictions around proactive safety treatments, not necessarily under a calculating perspective, but just setting a good, safe system to ensure that we're getting protection of our community. And I mean, there's a number of examples I could use. I'll use one of school speed zones, and that's probably one of our earliest, really, well, maybe not earliest, but it's a pretty good sort of proactive treatment, because the reason why is you're not just saying to the kids, you've got to be safe. You're not waiting for kids to die before you implement it. If you do the benefit cost calculation on it, it is a horrible investment. Absolutely horrible to do a school speed zone, because the reason for, that's on a sort of macro level. You can, each individual one will come up with a slightly different thing. But I did analyse this at one point in my time in Vic Roads and looking after speed zoning for the state, and we looked into that. And you do your simple benefit cost ratio calculation, which runs along the line of saying, well, how much do we value a human life at, a child? And there's the Bureau of Transport Economics that will give us good answers on that out of Canberra. And how many kids have been killed, and how many do we predict will be killed in the future? And then if we take all of these speed zones and we reduce them, what is that going to cost us? Yes, there's the signs and those sorts of things, so there's a cost there, but the real cost comes down to how much are we going to slow down people moving through there? And then you put a dollar figure to an hourly rate for the average Australian, and it's about $88 an hour usually is the average productivity dollar figure that they set, and you multiply that out in terms of the difference in them going through those zones and extra time, and you do that for every day of the week and all through throughout the year, and it comes out with this whopping figure of time multiplied by that $88 an hour and this huge dollar figure. And then you look and there's not enough death or serious injury predicted for kids to balance that off. But when you do it like that, it is so grotesque to say, well, not enough kids are killed. But that's what we do in other areas. And maybe it's because we feel that the adults driving on the Western Highway or the wherever it is should be looking after themselves and not leaving the road and the like. But we really jump and revert back down this ladder for other things. But that was an example of where we have taken that proactive safety culture. Okay, well, Kathy will jump in with any questions if they are there, but I'm just going to sort of quickly cover off some of the biomechanics of injury before I get you to do something. This curve, many of you have seen because it's been quite well, I suppose, distributed. But I will explain it again. Collision speed down the bottom is speed of impact, not speed of not speed limit. Sorry, I was going to say that. I was just thinking, Kathy, I'm just wondering, did we miss a quiz? Poll.
Yeah, I think we did, Ken.
Well, I'm going to leave that up there. It might help a bit, but let's just chuck up a little poll. Now, reminder to everybody, you are not being marked on this, but we want you to have a go at it. The first question we've sort of answered. The second one, I don't think, in fact, we certainly haven't gone through yet, but it's about to help in my next little statement. So hopefully that's popped up on your screen. 2 questions, have a guess, and we'll jump back into it shortly.
Pick up, Ken. So yeah, the first question is, which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? So which one is not a key principle? Aim for no death or serious injury. Aim for no mistakes on the road. People are vulnerable, people make mistakes. Shared responsibility. That's the finish line in his world record 100-metre sprint. 24 kilometres, 34 kilometres, 44 kilometres, 54 kilometres or 64 kilometres an hour.
Thank you, Kathy. Your audio is a little bit patchy when you, I think, maybe turn away or something. So
yeah, yes, it probably you're probably imagining what I'm doing there. We're about halfway through. To focus on my screen. So you must have something in mind, Ken, with this question about Usain Bolt.
I do. In fact, I was about to start saying something about Usain Bolt and then realised, hang on, we haven't done our little poll.
Yeah, very good. All right, we've almost got everyone. So if you're still debating, it's okay. As Ken said, you won't be marked on it, so we might just last guess. And I'll share those results.
Thank you. So which of the following is not a key principle of the SAFE system? Well, most of you are on it, aiming for no mistakes on the road. We want to minimise mistakes, but we're very fully aware that humans will make mistakes. So we minimise and manage is what the little phrase that I like to use. Minimise and manage mistakes on the road. And Usain Bolt, well, we had a good little bit of guessing there. And 44 kilometres per hour is the one. Now, I can understand 34 because some people probably did some quick back of envelope calculations, but maybe didn't account for the acceleration or the like. And so let's stop that, and I'll come back to where I was going. And we see collision speed, because I do like to give this analogy. Well, sorry, I better give the other axis. The y-axis here is fatality probability. That is chance of death for a pedestrian being struck by a passenger vehicle. So we've got speed of the vehicle coming in, hitting the pedestrian, and then what's the chance that it will result in death. Now, with Usain Bolt, I like to sort of imagine parking a car at the end of his lane, maybe like a 2016 Toyota Camry at the end of Usain Bolt's lane as he's running down there at 44 kilometers per hour, and then bang, he runs into that. Will he survive? And the answer is yes, most likely. He will survive. And in fact, he's the Hulk of a human. He's built to withstand a lot of force. Pick any of us mere mortals up, fling us at a car at 44 kilometers per hour, less likely to survive. Certainly pick up, your grandma and throw her at a car at 44 kilometers an hour, much less likely to survive. Usain Bolt comes in quite up the curve there at his 44 kilometers per hour. But this curve does represent all of society. And we get some sort of, anomalies at the end of each, of the bell curve anyway. But you see down here around 10, 20 or 30 kilometers per hour, we're fairly confident that the pedestrian will survive. Up around sort of 60, 70, 80 kilometers per hour, we're pretty confident the pedestrian will be killed. Now, there will be anomalies at each of these ends where a very low speed car park hit will result in fatality, and where a miracle sort of 70, 80 kilometer per hour strike will be survived. But generally, we know that around 30 kilometers per hour is where things go really bad really quickly. It really exponentially kicks up after that point. Now, interestingly, the National Road Safety Strategy's got this sort of wonderful graph of many different studies, and they sort of all have generally the same curve and show slightly different things on either side of it. But you can kind of put this as pretty much reasonable when you look at all of that. And it's kind of what we're built for. That guy runs full pelt into a pommel horse and breaks some ribs, but comes back, leads a normal, healthy life, wins the gold medal the next year. That's what we're built to handle. That's how we evolve. We're obviously now traveling a lot faster than that. We're having things travel at us. So we need to think about that, just biomechanics of injury, how much we can handle. We have this information though for other crash types, okay? So this is, the red line here is a side impact. And the collision speed is from the bullet vehicle. Now the bullet vehicle is in a crash, the one that does the damage, okay? This is the bullet vehicle. This is what we call the target vehicle in this scenario. So bullet vehicle speed, and then it's the target vehicle occupant that is the one that's going to be killed. And so we see there 40, 50 kilometers per hour is about that point where it really exponentially starts to kick up. And for head-on crashes, we see it at about that 70 kilometer per hour mark where it starts to really kick up. And that's 70 kilometers per hour for each vehicle. So I suppose a closing speed of 140 kilometers per hour, but the force on the individual occupant is a 70 kilometer per hour crash. It would be the equivalent of running head-on into a brick wall at 70. So, and if any of you are questioning the physics on that, there's a great Mythbusters episode that does exactly that. Head-on crashes cars and then crashes them into brick walls and puts accelerometers on them just to confirm that, which is good. In fact, we'll put a link in Moodle to that Mythbusters, so you can watch Mythbusters on work time. Another little thing that we do, and this is in your PDFs of the slides, is we put a little, when you see that little icon, you can click on it. It'll take you to a little bit more info on each of these topics through our little safe system snippets that we get out there. So you can click on that it'll take you to a little bit more info. So that'll be dotted throughout the course. So if you look at the PDFs, you can click on that and a little bit more info. But that line becomes really important. That line where things get really bad really quick. And that's the 30 km/h for pedestrians, the 50 for right angle crashes, the 70 for that head-on crash. It's sort of these threshold speeds that we talk about. And in a safe system assessment, we get into the point of starting to try to put numbers to that in a quantification of like a scoring mechanism. And I'm putting this here, and I'll show it to you again later on when we get to module 4 and we're starting to actually do some scoring and the like. But this here, we score out of 4 for safe system assessments in severity. And you can see there's different crash types with different road users at different speeds. And we can start to understand that, you know, which ones are going to be more severe and less severe. And there's this really interesting, I suppose, change in my career where I predominantly, you know, in the early phases of my career, looked at the road network in crash potential and sort of would really be looking for those, or that blocking sight lines, or that's a deceiving road. It looks like it goes, you know, around a curve, but it really goes straight, or, you know, these sorts of things. And I've evolved now to look at the potential energy of the road network. I still looking at all those things that might cause crashes, but really the big focus is just looking at speed, weight of vehicle, vulnerability of road user, angles of crashes. And they're all things that are just the physics and the biomechanics. Because I'm assuming a crash is going to happen, how bad is that going to be? I'm assuming people are going to stuff up. How much energy is going to be involved in that crash? And that's sort of so fundamental to the safe system.
Sorry, just before you jump into the next bit, is there any data available for rear end crash types, or is there a method of deriving it?
It's a good question. So rear ends are really, a challenging one. So there's a guy at the Centre for Automotive Safety Research in the University of Adelaide who is doing his PhD on these crash injury curves, and he's come up with some different things. In the National Road Safety Strategy, there is some information about different types of frontal crashes from the individual perspective. But in the end, what we do, we talk about rear ends as the higher end speed. So we're talking about a threshold speed somewhere in the 70, 80 km/h. Now, that's more thinking for fatality, and might be a bit lower in terms of serious injury due to some challenges there. But compared to side impact, pedestrian strikes, crashes with trees, side impact with trees and the like, we know it's a far more survivable because you're sort of taking energy and you're able to move your energy forward with the vehicle that's getting struck from the rear end can move forward, if that makes sense. Because it all comes back to vectors. If you're familiar, you remember back to year 11 physics and we did vectors and the like, you're able to shunt that forward. And so some of the energy can be pushed forward rather than going into the occupant of the vehicle. And there are some formulas, and you basically use vectors and first principles in terms of energy, kinetic energy, to work some of that out. And there are very sophisticated models, or reasonably sophisticated models, that you can get some information out on that, the kinetic energy management model being the primary one of those. But rear ends, think around the 60, 70, 80 km/h mark for the delta V, the change in speed. So if one car's traveling at 80 and the other's at 90 and they rear end, obviously the delta V is 10, and so it's not a severe incident. But if, you know, one's 0 and one hits it at 100, we've got a delta V of 100, and now we've got a big energy transfer. Great question, though. Thank you. Prize, Kathy. Prize for question asker. Okay. So the traditional, like this diagram, it's sort of the bane of my existence in road safety, more internationally than in Australia. Like the reason for this is that it is not wrong, but it's the way people use it. And what it is the representation of a crash, like in-depth crash study where they take thousands and thousands of crashes and they really do sort of root cause analysis and really great research. And what they discover is that the driver, or this is in this study it was drivers, but you could say road users because there's like hundreds of these studies out there. The driver is at fault in about 90 to 95% of crashes. And you know, roads play a role. Sometimes, you know, a tree's fallen on the road, or you know, some other thing. Sometimes there's this driver road infrastructure interface issues, and then the vehicle are even smaller part in terms of, you know, big tire blowouts or you know, wheels falling off or brakes not working and those sort of things, a minor amount of that. And anyway, this comes out all the time, right? And when people are told, and especially people new to road safety are told, 94% of, this is the Kimball study, 94% of crashes are the result of, you know, human error. Their immediate reaction is to then focus all of their attention on trying to improve the humans in the system. Well, kind of logical, wouldn't it be? You know, look at your biggest problem, try and fix that. Well, the issue there is that we've been doing this just for a long time, and they continue to always come out at 90 to 95% of the issue. Okay, we are not fixing humans. Okay, we do over many sort of generations or decades, we're able to get some better behavior in different areas, right? But it's about changing the system. Okay, so what really bugs me when somebody new to road safety comes in, discovers one of these and thinks they've got the whole thing worked out, and you know, that should be banned, that diagram. This is what we should be looking at. We have system failures. Of course, our road user has stuffed up. I mean, that is being human, right? Why did the system not protect them? Now, this is an Austroads representation of this diagram, and they've put driver access and driver inexperience out here. They created some system sort of boundaries, very, you know, generous boundaries, but nonetheless, there's a lot of people who would just say, well, no, that sits in there and that sits in there. That's system failure as well. If you've let a vehicle, if the system's let a vehicle go into these highly excessive 250 km/h down the wrong way of the freeway style crashes, how did that vehicle not stop that? Right? And drive experience, hey, you know, how did somebody who can completely have no clue how to operate this this machinery be able to be out there doing it? You know, I'll leave that for a little bit of debate. And human error is interesting. Like, there's a good report, and it's actually also from the Centre for Automotive Safety Research in Adelaide, an Austroads report that talks about human error in the road transport system, and talks about the fact that road safety has focused, well, the perception of road crashes and death and serious injury on the roads, at least to the general public, is down this end, about deliberate violators. And people who have made conscious decisions to drive at excessive speeds, to run red lights, to, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, to be really, you know, hopped up on ice and drugs and the like, and driving at excessive speed. But that represents somewhere around 35% of our death and serious injury. The bulk is people just going about their business, generally trying to act correctly and failing. Just like we've all made mistakes already today. They're very minor little mistakes, but hopefully none have resulted in death or serious injury. But that's an environment where the system is so flawed that those minor mistakes can result in death or serious injury. So I think this one below the line needs a very different approach to road safety than we have. It is still a system approach to it, but we need some really significant alterations there. I mean, it actually becomes a whole societal challenge. The bulk of the time, the people involved in these have many life issues going on. And yeah, so the saying that sticks out to me in some work we did for Austroads is people, they drive the way they live, which I think is quite an interesting way of saying it. But that's the below the line people, the bulk of it. So I'll predominantly be focusing on this in the work that we're going to be going forward with, but we do remember this and we don't ignore it in a safe system assessment either. Okay, time for a little task for you, and we're going to give you 4 minutes or so, 5 minutes to do this task, and also have that stretch break, fill your water up. Remember, you're not being marked on it, but we do want you to have a crack at it. It's a good way to consolidate our thinking. But what we've got here is this mix and match, the traditional approach to road safety and the safe system approach. And what we want you to do is connect the two. So there was a culture of victim blaming, and we are moving in the safe system to, whatever it is, 4 pillars, action independently, whatever you decide it could go to. Now, I do say very clearly here that some could go to multiple spots, so don't get over concerned about it. Just have a go at it, consolidate your thinking, and we'll come back in 4 minutes from now and also have your stretch break. It should come up on your screen as a poll to make it easier. So you can just go from traditional and then you can pick the one you think would be best. Okay, we'll be back in 4 minutes. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks. Most of you have popped stuff in there. You've done well. I'm going to end that now. I'll give it 5 seconds if anybody just wants to hit enter. There we go. Got one more. What am I going to do here? No, I'll have a quick look through. We've got some general consensus on a few of these, but I actually think I'll do it on the screen to be easier here. I'm going to stop sharing that, sorry. And there we go. Okay, so victim blaming, well, that recognizing human error and trying to minimize its consequence, and that shared responsibility we talked about. Emphasis on road user education and compliance, could have gone to a few here, but that effort to create a forgiving system. Not to say we're ignoring road user education and compliance, it's just understanding human error as well. So going from crash reduction to enhanced focus on that consequence and severe injury minimization. So, and the 4 pillars, well, now 4 pillars optimized jointly as an interaction, and there are very interacting elements of the system. And mobility safety balance to maximizing safe mobility. As I say, don't get stressed if you went to a few others. It was a way to just try to consolidate some thinking. But I think this is a nice little statement from Ian Cameron, who's a Western Australian. This was made on a sort of international platform, but we need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make simple mistakes. The safe system creates an environment in which simple mistakes will no longer kill people, or kill or seriously injure people. let's do another little exercise. And this one is, yeah, so this is the Melbourne Highway, as you can see on the bottom there. This is a while back, and they'd just installed this central wire rope safety barrier system in a narrow flush median. Here's a little bit more of it, as you can see there, a little bit of a 2+1 scenario, as in 2 lanes in one direction, and then it sort of swaps over who gets the overtaking opportunity. Now, you don't know much about this project, but it was the first central barrier in narrow median in this configuration in Victoria. And it was fairly early. New Zealand had done a bit of this stuff, but this is pretty early on. Without knowing anything more than sort of the fact that it's an 100 km/h road and you can see sort of what you can see, what challenges do you think the project development planning team in this region faced in trying to take this road from a white line or 2 white lines separating the lanes of traffic to this scenario with a barrier system down the middle? So just jot them in the chat and I will give out a prize. There's a couple of things, not necessarily the biggest hurdles they face, but some very interesting ones that I'm going to jot down. And if you match mine, you can have a prize. So just pop them into the chat. What do you think might have been challenges that the project development, design, planning teams faced in trying to get this central barrier system in place?
Ken?
Yes.
Whilst people are doing that, we had a question earlier around crash severity, and I was wondering if we could take that one now. So this was back a number of slides. The question is there a generally accepted crash severity score 0 to 4?
It's a really good question, but it is better answered when we get into the scoring in module 4. So it's probably one I want to put a pause on for now, because it's actually a complicated interaction between exposure, likelihood, and the severity, and a resulting sort of risk score out of that, rather than just looking at one particular element. But we'll delve into that in module 4.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, wow. This is excellent. Okay, so I'm just reading through them as they come in, and it's like this group's tried to implement one of these, because all of the things that are coming up are really good, good examples. So we've got things like availability of stopping lanes, areas for people to pull over and being able to get around those, pavement widths, formation widths, the community acceptance, which is, yep, these are all good things. Which barrier to use is a really good one. The widening, so maintenance acceptance. So that's a really interesting one. There was a lot of reluctance from the maintenance team to put this in to be able to maintain the existing road and have vehicles, you know, go around the work sites and maintain the barriers themselves once struck, and sort of saying, oh, this is... Actually, I'll give a prize to that one there. Was Walter, I think. Road widening, environmental, yes. So there was some, because of a little bit of widening and the environmental impact. Traffic management, yes. This is good. I'm skipping through a few of them because I've got so many. This is good. So median width is an interesting one, and it really came around because of deflection of the barrier system into the other lane. So Andy can have a prize for that. That is sort of a bit more general, but I think along the same one, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then Brian came in there after that. So can have a prize for that as well. Perceived issues with the barrier, depending on which road user. Yes, so the motorcyclists did come out about that. I'll talk about that in a later module. Motorcyclists and barrier systems. A couple talking about, will people understand it? Do we need to do education around how to use this and all of that, which is certainly stuff to think about. Okay, good, good stuff there. The thing is what was that in about a minute, you came up with sort of 30 reasons why this project would be very hard and maybe can't be done. And the thing is, as we are trying to change our system, it's the way roads have been built for a very long time and way they've existed, and people have driven them or walked on them or ridden them for a very long time. We're trying to make these changes. And of course, there's going to be pushback, right? The easiest thing to do would just be to continue doing what we've always done. But what we're trying to do is change that whole system. And so we're going to face a lot of this. And our challenge is to be able to sort of work through these issues in a meaningful way. But one thing that is really going to help, and it would have helped a huge amount in this project, is a safe system assessment. And the big reason for that, and one of the big differences between road safety audits and safe system assessments here, is that a road safety audit's job is to find the safety issues with this project. A safe system assessment's job is to quantify the benefits that this will provide and also try to lessen any negative impacts. But the road safety audits on these jobs simply talk about, well, the barrier is going to deflect into the other lane when struck because it's a wire rope system, it's flexible, and that doesn't meet the standards, and that's a danger. Then all of the issues that you are sort of coming up with, well, maybe the road safety auditor might come up with those, but the thing is that the central barrier system, even with little deficiencies like this, is going to be so beneficial in terms of getting us towards that safe system, that we need something to be able to table to show this benefit, and the safe system assessment is doing that. The deflection one really got me scratching my head for a long time there, because it ended up, this was sort of before a flexible W beam was a really good option in a central, and it was going to provide lots of big benefits, but that people were really worried about this little bit of deflection possibility into that other lane. And the reality is that, lots of vehicles will hit it on a lesser angle. Lots of vehicles will hit it and they would have gone way into the other lane, but they're quickly brought back. There's this very minute chance that it will be maximum deflection and a vehicle is running, close to edge line, which is, that people were really fundamentally saying, you just can't do it. You've just got to, if you can't get that width, you just leave it as a center line. Wow. So we're going to accept that we could get a massive reduction in risk with a very small, residual sitting there, but that's unacceptable compared to the leaving that huge gaping risk there of not putting a barrier system. And the justification often comes down to people saying, well, as soon as you touch it, you have to do the perfect job. So it's easy to just leave it there. And we need to challenge that. Yes, we want to get the perfect thing every time, but if we can get 95% benefit that we wanted, or 98% benefit, and we work on that last 2% and maybe put in other measures. Anyway, it got implemented and it got hit. Of course, it got hit. And it gets hit a bit. And when it got hit, and there was the regional engineer got a phone call from the public, and you've no doubt all been in that position or could imagine it, and you think you're about to be shouted at for something you've done. But in this case, the person wanted to just thank whoever put the barrier system in, because they've been driving that road for many years, and this time they were just driving it, and a car veered directly at them, And this was the first time they'd driven it, and there was a barrier in there, and they hit the barrier, and yeah, they thought it certainly saved their life. Anyway, that engineer was smart enough to quickly get the comms team and get their details, and then they made a nice little video, which we put in Moodle, and it sort of, to me, encapsulates the idea that people are going to make mistakes. They're not bad people. They've made a mistake. Somebody fell asleep, drifted off to the left, and they overcorrected and they went to the right. And the system stepped in. Yes, there's still been a crash, but it's crashed with the barrier. The energies were all within tolerable levels. Everybody walked away. If it hadn't had a barrier, we would certainly be blaming the driver for not being in control of the vehicle, driving after not having much sleep, falling asleep. You know, there's absolutely no shortage of failures from them. But would we be really analysing and saying, what can we do to change our system? I think it's a really great video actually to share to others. So do have a look at that in Moodle in Module 1 video, or in the videos. Kathy will show you at the end. Okay, I briefly want to talk about road users and vehicles before we spend the rest of the course on roads and speeds. The reason I want to do this is for a few reasons. One is that in a safe system assessment, a full safe system assessment, you're asked questions that you have to qualitatively answer around, say, for road users and vehicles and those sort of things. So you have to be armed with a bit of knowledge. You don't need to be an expert in these areas, but you have to be armed with a bit of knowledge. The second one is that when you tell people what you do at a barbecue or wherever you are, no doubt they start talking to you about their ideas on how road safety, how we should fix roads and fix driving behaviour and everything like that. It's an interesting industry to be in because the public generally feels they're an expert in what we do because they've been driving or walking or riding, and they feel that that experience gives them expertise. It's a very hard thing actually as an individual within road safety to draw yourself out of your individual experience and talk to the research and make decisions based on the research and the evidence rather than your personal experience. Sometimes personal experience can help out a bit, but you need to be very careful. But there's a few things in road safety, a few myths out there, and a few things that the public really believe will fix our issues that it is so well proven will not, or vice versa, that we need to just arm you with that as you go forward. So let's talk about road users. Let's talk about education, encouragement, enforcement, and the licensing system, or entry into the system in one form or another. So first of all, and this is not anything that the public disagree with, everybody tends to agree with this, is that the best education can be done on little humans. They're the most receptive to education and setting behaviours for their life. So that investment in there is a good thing. It does need to continue through their school and career. But for young drivers, they're particularly at risk. And there's a few little quick things I want to hit on the head. The first thing is a tip for anybody who has a young driver, somebody who's just starting out: do not send them on an advanced driver training course. They come out of it far more likely to be killed or seriously injured. And this, when I say advanced driver training, I'm talking about anything at high speed, learning to get out of skids, high-speed braking maneuvers. They simply go in, they get new skills, they come out more confident, they take more risks, and the very small percentage of time where they're able to use these new skills to avoid crashes is absolutely swamped by the increased risk-taking and the ones that they can't get themselves out of. One of the best research things around the world in road safety. So there's that one. Simply giving young drivers their 120 hours or more, or significant hours in the public road environment, and getting them to help build a map of understanding how risk presents itself on the road network is what is proven to actually be effective. There are some sort of classroom style training courses that can be done as well that can be beneficial. And the car, swapping cars with your young drivers is extremely effective because their risk profile is very high and inevitably going to be in a car that has minimal safety features, where the parents often low risk profile, extremely safe car. So we've got that dynamic on. In terms of the education and behavioural change initiatives in road safety, the idea of telling somebody to not do something for their own safety does not work. Okay? Actually, I shouldn't say it does not work, because it works with a certain cohort of the community who are the lowest risk people of doing that anyway. So if you tell people, don't text and drive because you will be involved in a crash, they're like, nah, I only do it when it's safe. I've been doing it for ages, and I haven't crashed. I don't believe this, right? And they'll continue to do it. But if you say, if you text and drive, your kids will text and drive. Then we've got a hook and a lever. And the TAC took this in this ad, and I think it's a brilliant ad. It's basically trying to tell that story. And that is effective with the individual there to stop texting and driving, but not telling them it's for their safety. And we do that with speed limits as well. And you've got a 100km/h road and you want to drop it to 80km/h. And you go, well, this is to improve safety, improve your safety. And they don't believe it. I've been driving this road for 40 years. I've never had a crash. And it's all those idiots, they can't drive, and these sorts of things. And we are looking at things from a community, a collective level, collective risk. And that's what we need to be sort of communicate. Well, that's probably the answer to this, is that driver driving that road at 100km/h is very low risk of being killed or seriously injured, like minute risk of serious injury. And at 80km/h is also minute, just a little minuter, little smaller risk. But the thing is that we add up all the drivers on that road all the time and get this collective risk, which is a significant risk at 100km/h and a significant drop in that risk at 80km/h. And it's the same with texting and driving. And don't tell this one at the barbecue, but the actual individual risk of being killed or seriously injured because you're texting and driving is minuscule, absolutely minuscule, right? But when we have so much of the community doing it, that collects and adds up to a significant risk to society. And so we then, as community practitioners in road safety, we talk about this collective risk. The individuals hear it as individual risk, and they just switch off and they don't believe us. So you've got to look for these other ways to communicate these messages and try and change behavior. So what works? A whole school program throughout kids' careers in school or education. Combining it with police activity or infrastructure in terms of the education works pretty well at a community level and a school level. Support for community education, because we do have really passionate people in the community to improve road safety. And what our role is to ensure what they're investing their time and their effort and their money in actually is going to benefit road safety. We do see, it really makes me so sad when I see a community who is actually, dedicating their weekends and digging into their pocket and having community barbecues and fundraisers, and they collect all this money to do road safety initiatives, and then they put that into something either that we know doesn't work, actually makes things worse, or does nothing. And we see this, like taking kids to the morgue or the trauma ward just doesn't work. It again and again it gets evaluated to show that all it does is take the safest of the kids and make them even scareder, right? And the ones that are the real risks, they just sort of disassociate the whole thing. So there's an example, and advanced driver training and a few other things. Graduated licensing works really well. That's where you put lots of restrictions as people start and you ease them off as their risk profile goes down. Education targeting especially motivated groups, the most motivated being parents. And you can get some really great traction in road safety by targeting the parents to then either invest in better safety features in the vehicles or different mechanisms to try to minimize their kids' risk. But you've got to make sure that it's not, oh, we'll send them to advanced driver training, because that'll minimize their risk, actually increase the risk. Action programs that change the way road users use the network. I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. I think I've covered most of these, but what does not work? Actually, I haven't really done fear tactics. I did a bit with the morgue and the trauma ward, but the shock and awe campaigns we saw in the 90s TV ads of really horrific crash scenes and all of that. You really won't see much of that going forward. That served a purpose. It was less about behavioural change and more about getting legislation in place. Okay, so fear tactics can play a role if you're trying to get some law passed. Scare the hell out of the community. They start to accept more why they're getting restricted on different things. But scare the hell out of the community so they change their driving behaviour. Again, that segment of the population that's affected by it ain't who we're targeting. So fear tactics, use carefully. Skill-based driver training we talked about. One-off events. There's nothing in the driver simulator space yet that seems to be from an evidence base showing improvement in road safety behaviour. Keep an eye on that one though. That there's something could be done there, no doubt. Go-kart, car racing clubs, same as skill-based driver training. It actually just increases risk-taking behaviour. Information-only approaches, again, just the number of people killed on a road or the number of people killed in an area doesn't really do anything. There's quite a few studies. There was quite a recent study which has the same results as a study from about 25 years ago, showing that just telling people how many people have been killed in an area or on a road does not change their behaviour. Okay, this one is an interesting graph. It shows some casualty crash numbers on the y-axis here, and driving experience. So at the learners who have a supervising driver next to them, really safe drivers. As soon as they step out and are able to drive by themselves, we see a massive jump in the number of deaths and serious injuries. And then it goes down over time. And it actually never gets down to how safe a learner driver is. If you do it by vehicle kilometres travelled, so to try to account for the amount that learners are driving compared to the amount of full licensed drivers, it's a bit closer. But still, a learner driver is one of our safest drivers, if not the safest drivers we have out there. They have no skills. They literally don't know how to do anything. They're trying to work out where the indicators are, but they're our safest drivers. Okay, so it shows you, and you can take it from there to there. Driver skill is not the answer to our road safety trauma issues. Okay, it's the system that we've got sitting around it, and then a whole lot of other, risk-taking and complex stuff. Okay, how are we going on top? Kathy, jump in with any questions as they come, please. Keep those questions coming in. I think I do have a little quiz for you coming up at some point. Encouragement, incentivizing campaigns and programs work. Paying people to drive safely seems to actually work. You can be a bit more creative than just like handing over cash, but sometimes like giving a free full license to somebody who's gone through their probationary period with no demerit points actually seems to incentivize in a decent way. And so we see some behavior change associated with that. And you can be quite creative with your incentivizing campaigns. And I think it's something we've lacked in road safety. We're pretty good at the big stick and enforcement, but encouragement and incentivizing has been a little less. Advertising and marketing of that specific behavior is important. So, just drive safely campaign really does nothing, because what does that mean? But if you can say, take a 10-minute break or 15-minute break every 2 hours of driving, or 10 minutes, whatever it is, that really specific behavior is quite effective, and it helps people a lot. And we get into interesting trying to understand what will make people change, what do they recall, how do you do a good marketing campaign. And there's brilliant people out there in these spaces. So we use those a lot in the road safety space, but comedy is particularly effective with our most targeted market segment, which is young males. And comedy is really effective in their recall and sometimes in getting some change in action. But I put in a few of my favorite road safety ads with some comedy associated with them into Moodle there. Have a look at those, and they're really quite effective. And we're trying to change that culture really from that blame and it's all the extreme driver behaviour and that's causing all the death and serious injury to understanding that our system is inherently flawed as it is, and we need to really alter that system. And so you'll see like a lot of ads starting to come out that are within those principles of the safe system. This one talking about other people make mistakes, so mistakes. This one sort of moves the dial a bit, but probably not as far as we'd like. But it's certainly not trying to say that you make mistakes, so you should slow down. No, it's saying other people can make mistakes, so we need to do that. Human tolerance to physical force. So some of you know Graham and have met Graham, and Graham's a scarily real life-like sculpture design. This is what humans would need to look like to survive the forces on the road. And you can walk around him with an iPad and see inside him. And it's actually part of the schooling program in year 11. Kids will go see Graham. They do a little activity at the museum, SSA, the area of the museum, which is getting them to change the road environment, and Graham sort of becomes more like a human that we could recognize. And so they do things like slowing, putting barrier systems in, lowering speed limits, raising crossing points, and the like, where the speeds go down or the angles of impact or the energy management goes down. And it's trying to plant this seed in the kids to start questioning why we're accepting such massive forces on the road. And just trying to change a culture, really. Enforcement is very good and important, and sort of it plays a role in road safety. The police very clearly say that this is not the answer. We need the system to change, but important in sort of holding things within that system that we're going to create. We need to be slightly, we do need strategic enforcement effort just due to lack of resources. You can't just be deploying things everywhere. And there's two areas here, and you've probably heard of specific deterrence or general deterrence. Specific deterrence is if you have been fined for a particular thing, you won't do that again. And the general deterrence is that you could be fined for something, and you won't do it. And visual presence is quite effective for that general deterrence. And it's probably one of the things that gives us an immediate change in road safety outcomes, deaths per year or serious injuries per year. Just a bigger visual presence, creating bigger general deterrence, gives us some instantaneous change there. Everything else happens over a long time. And automated enforcement's really, taking off. It comes with all sorts of curly privacy challenges and equity challenges and those sorts of things. But red light cameras, speed cameras, point-to-point cameras, these are very effective mechanisms. As I say, they come with their particular challenges. I suppose while I'm on it, the point-to-point speed camera. So that's where a vehicle goes through a point and a photograph of its number plate is taken, and then down the 10 kilometers down the road or whatever, another photo is taken, and the time taken between those two is measured, and distance, and you've got speed, and it's an average speed. I'm sure you all know them. I mean, every jurisdiction is no, I didn't say that. I don't think that's quite right. Most jurisdictions in Australia use it. Most jurisdictions in Australia use it for all vehicles. New South Wales is the only one that only uses it for heavy vehicles. And it's a pretty neat thing, and it's generally seen as a bit fairer. But the Swedes took this to the next level and actually incorporated incentivizing it in what they called speed lotto. And basically the way speed lotto worked was that because they took a photo of your number plate here and down the road, anybody that was speeding obviously got fined, but anybody that wasn't speeding went into the draw to win all the money of the speeders. And I'm like, that's hit the nail on incentivizing road safety perfectly. It's dispelled any myths of revenue raising, because it's all going back to somebody. It takes advantage of humans, obsession with gambling, and to me it's just like wins all around. And quite a successful little venture that they did. We haven't done that in Australia. Every time we talk about it, people go into meltdown on privacy and use of information, and basically, you're taking people's details for something that is not what the legislation allows for. Anyway, technology is doing amazing things, not just in what the car will do itself, but what you can do within the vehicle. Like, alcohol interlocks, for example, where you got to blow into it, be 0-0, and you drive, and then it'll beep randomly at you, and you've got 5 minutes to blow into it again, just to try to weed out those people who get somebody else to blow into it. But that is a really neat social enforcement mechanism, because the alternate approach, which we did for a long time, was really just to catch people drink driving, take their license off them, impound their vehicle, give them a massive fine. And it's sort of discovered that you quite often are taking somebody and you are then spiraling them socially further out of control, because now they don't have a car, they can't get to the work, they can't pick up their kids, it just really starts to spiral things. But if you can address the particular risks using this technology, that's a great way of doing it. Same with the way vehicles now, you can set maximum speeds with different keys. They give a particular key to your kids, and they can't speed, and they can do traction. They keeps traction control on. Maximum stereo stuff. There's lots of amazing stuff happening in vehicles, and the technology's really not been the issue. I mean, this was my Vic Roads car 15 years ago. And it had an ISA device in it, which would tell me what speed zone I was in and beep at me if I was going over the speed limit, and could easily have actually interacted with the car and not let that happen. That was 15 years ago. So the technology is not the issue. We could centrally monitor that. We could have, at least start with the high-end speeders and say, well, you now get a device in your vehicle, and we will centrally monitor how fast you're going everywhere. Yeah, it's again the privacy challenges and the legal issues. So there's a bit of a summary there of some of those key points. I'm not going to go through those. You can read them in your own time if you want a summary. I'll just briefly go through the vehicles and say that vehicle technology is taking off, but it's not as far advanced as we would, I suppose, like it to be. Now, there's two types of vehicle sort of technologies I'm talking about. One is the sort of impact energy absorption, airbags, crumple zones, and the like. The other is the vehicle, stopping crashes happening in the first place. And the stopping crashes happening in the first place is advancing much better. We did a whole lot of great advancements in this space, but even things like a side impact into a pole. In fact, Kathy, I'll give a prize to the person who can tell me in the ANCAP, to get 5 stars, you have to side impact a pole at a certain speed, and this dummy has to basically not get level 3 brain injuries, like death or brain injuries. And it's done at a certain speed. Have a guess at that speed. Okay, what are we seeing? A range from 30 to 80 so far.
Are you looking for the exact answer, Ken?
We'll take the first person who said 30. It's gone up from 29 kilometers per hour to 32 kilometers per hour. And you kind of go, well, it just shows how far off we are in terms of the speeds we drive around the road network with power poles and trees and fixed hazards like point source hazards, we call them. And our safe system says people are going to make mistakes, they're going to leave the road, and we're just nowhere near the vehicle handling those forces. But the vehicles are getting better at not leaving the roads or not letting you leave the road, so that's good. Pedestrian, they're pretty much all new vehicles off the production line now, and actually for the last about 5 years at least, have the bonnets pop up, so you get cushioning of the head when you hit a pedestrian, or an airbag will pop out over the bonnet. So we're thinking about the vulnerable road users outside the vehicle. But when do we get to this vehicle, which is the either level 4 or level 5 autonomous vehicle? Level 4 doesn't have a steering wheel either, but it's geofenced or quarantined to certain areas. The level 5 vehicle is the one that can go anywhere and has no steering, no driver. Right now, you get little level 4s putting around the beach side and those sort of things. It's really a long time off. And not only is it a long time off actually getting the technology and the legislation and the system all set up around these, it's also then the changeover of the fleet and people's ability to do it, and people actually getting on board with all of this. So it's a long way away, and there's so much death and serious injury to come that we need to start to work on this and not sit back and say the vehicles will answer all our questions. But a safe system assessment does start to move a little bit into this territory and asks some qualitative questions around, what will the vehicles of the future be doing in this new road that you're looking at, or in this altered road, and then you get to do a little bit of what we call roads that cars can read. You start to do some of that thinking, and you may, like in a massive safe system assessment, you'd engage people who know a heap about this sort of stuff. But, there's some sort of basic things that people can think about. Is the line marking going to mislead the vehicle? Are the signs readable for the vehicle? Is there communication available for the vehicle to be able to get its... there's some interesting stuff. Most safe system assessments, you really don't get into it because they're too small and they don't have a lot of meat in that, but it's an interesting space. And but we will see this sort of advance of vehicle technology. You can see all these braking by themselves. And what we'll start to see is that collisions will happen at lower speeds because the vehicles will jump in and say, well, crash is about to happen, I'm braking, even though you decided not to brake. And so like this one, where it's probably a win. The dummy's just had its leg come off rather than it hitting at a high speed. And speed, let's talk about that. Speed is so important to the safe system, and I want to remind you of some of the fundamentals of speed and speed management. First of all, we've got the fact that speed is not linear in terms of speed, travel speed to impact speed. And this one always describes it quite well. Here we go, we've got something at 45 meters. Maybe somebody steps out at 45 meters. And if you are traveling at 60 kilometers, or somebody's traveling at 60 kilometers in a vehicle, they react, they see somebody step out, they brake, and they just touch them. If we go up 10 kilometers per hour in terms of travel speed, we see that they hit it at 46 kilometers an hour, not 10 kilometers an hour or more, right? So that immediately, well, that's showing you the non-linear relationship. So what we know from heaps of research actually is that for fatal crashes, it's a fourth power relationship between change in speed and change in crashes, fatal crashes. And it's a third power relationship for serious injuries. Now, if you don't play in power relationships in terms of maths type things, don't get too stressed. It just means that we're, small changes in speed have large ramifications in terms of death, still large for serious injury and a little less large for other injuries. So when we can get some small reductions in speed, we can see some big results. The public and speed, and especially speed limits, is a very vexed sort of relationship. It's very challenging. Like the question here were asked to Tasmanians, actually, quite a lot of Tasmanians. Lowering the current speed limits would reduce crashes on the road. And about half Tasmanians don't believe that. This actually plays out across Australia and New Zealand about the same. Everybody seems to be generally the same. Obviously, you can see females are a little bit smarter and understand things a little bit better. But generally, this is about right. If you say, though, lowering speed limits would reduce the severity of injury of a crash when it occurs, we see that the majority of the population is on board with that. And that's quite an interesting one. And still actually talking about speed limits, maybe then you could say that some of these people are saying, well, it's not going to reduce speed, travel speed, so, making that a secondary link. But it is interesting, at least the community sort of understands basic physics that we're going to get more severely injured at higher speeds. But we do need to, I suppose, understand that the community is in this space and try to think about how we manage that. So simply going out and reducing all the speed limits across the country it will, first of all, it'll backfire on us because these people will all go berserk and politically it will get pushed back. But it is interesting to understand that we can get travel speeds altered in one way or another, but maybe we don't need to. I'll explain. Let me explain this. I put this diagram into the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 3, which is speed and speed management, when I was updating it just last year. And the reason for that is that we know what the biomechanics of humans are, and we can't really change that unless we start genetically engineering people or saying that certain people can't drive vehicles because they're or can't use the road because they're too vulnerable, like in terms of physical force to them, which is not going to fly. But you take that as a limiting factor, then you feed it through what you've got in terms of the vehicles, the roads, and the road users, and then you can create a safe system because you just filter it through a speed. It works. And the thing is that you can do this, and the speed does not necessarily need to be low. Take, for example, a racetrack, which is probably one of our safest systems we've got in terms of road style transport. It's a closed system, obviously, but we've got extremely safe vehicles. We've got a wonderfully designed road. which doesn't allow for these crashes and energy transfer, big cleared areas, and then lots of cushioning and the like, and understanding that specific areas you can't go in and the like, and the road users are very good and wearing their seatbelts and sober and the like. And under that circumstance, very high speeds are appropriate for a safe transport system. Yeah, I won't go into any detail. But we do need to think that safe speeds can be achieved through the infrastructure and or the speed limit. So we can play both. And the infrastructure is generally more effective. And explaining why that speed limit's in place can work really well in terms of getting acceptance and compliance and protection of vulnerable road users, generally well accepted. And by vulnerable road users, I mean everything from sort of, you know, kids and old people, but also just cyclists and pedestrians in general. And we know variable speed zones are more accepted by the community. And some summary points were there you can look back on. Okay, I'm just going to finish off on something, and Kathy will then quickly show you Moodle. But risk has traditionally been this likelihood times consequence. And that is, you know, what is the chance that a bad thing is going to happen, and how bad is it going to be? What's the magnitude of badness? So, you know, that's like risk all around. That's like health risk, environmental risk, road safety risk. What's the chance that we're going to recession? Then how bad is the recession going to be? You know, that's the risk of recession. In roads, you know, what's the chance of a crash? And then what's the magnitude of injury we're talking about? In a safe system assessment, we extract exposure out of likelihood. So we say, how many people are exposed to this hazard? And with this hazard, what is the chance that the crash will happen? And then when the crash happens, how bad will it be? And we will be spending a lot of time in ensuring that you are able to categorize things into these categories, because that is fundamental to a safe system assessment, that you're able to do this. And so I'll show you sort of some treatments, and throughout the whole course, anytime I put a treatment up, I'll be putting up something like this, which will say, well, this affects exposure, or this affects likelihood, or this affects severity, or this affects, you know, a few of these. This one's a bit hard to see, but it's simply a level crossing, and they've put a mound of dirt and a road closed sign on the other side, and they've closed the crossing. And that has removed the exposure to it. No vehicles are exposed to that. No road users are exposed to that. That's something that changes exposure. Similarly, if you completely separate vulnerable road users from vehicles in a park like this, they are not exposed to that vehicle to cyclist or vehicle to pedestrian crash. That they're not exposed to it. Yeah, they might be exposed to, you know, pedestrian to cyclist crashes, but that particular crash I'm not exposed to. Likelihood, the chance of a crash happening, is a lot of the stuff we've traditionally done. But things like sealed shoulders, clear zones, you know, good pavement, audio tactiles, wide center lines, lighting, these are all things that are trying to stop the crash happening. Traffic signals are a likelihood reducer. Okay, none of those things are going to impact on the severity of the crash if it does occur. They're trying to stop the crash happening in the first place. And we want to continue to do that. But the severity really comes down to us being able to work with the speed, the mass, the angle. They're pretty much the ones we have control over. You could get into, you know, requiring people to wear helmets in vehicles, or pedestrians wear inflatable things, but, you know, that's a bit socially too far. But what we have control in, usually within our design, and slowing vehicles, such as a raised platform on the approach to a conflict point, means there'll be less energy. The severity will be less when the conflict occurs. Barrier systems are a classic severity. I mean, hitting a barrier system running along it reduces the severity of the crash. the chance of the crash actually goes up because there's more barrier to hit. You know, you're going to hit something like the central barrier, for example. You know, you drift out of your lane, you're going to hit the barrier, you're in a crash. Most of the other time you drift out of your lane, you'll probably be lucky and you'll come back and go, oh my God, I just went onto the wrong side of the road. So this is all about severity reduction. So that's pretty much where I wanted to get to. We're going to pick up next session at that point, and we're really going to delve into that exposure likelihood severity, the biomechanics of injury, analyzing crash forces, and then get you to a point where you can quantify that. You could assess the design and come out with some answers on how, you know, much likelihood, you know, what's the chance the crash will happen, how many are exposed to it, and what the severity will be. Kathy, let's have a look at Moodle and we'll take any questions people might have.
Thank you, Ken. So if you jump into Moodle, first I want to show you the resources section and reference documents and resources here. There is a mountain of things in there, but some of the things that Ken covered off today, what doesn't work for young road users and why. There's some excellent fact sheets in there that go into a little bit more detail.
Oh, that's a good point, actually, Kathy, because you shouldn't just, blindly believe what I'm telling you. You should actually have a look at the research behind that. And it's all documented in there with the big studies and like. So thank you.
Okay, it is, yes, absolutely. And these easy to read fact sheets also have their references on there as well. So it is fabulous, but that's all in there. So for extra reading and resourcing and everything else, that's all there. In module 1, which is where we are today, there's that presentation. There's the videos that Ken also mentioned. So we've got the Melbourne Highway TSE video that was in there, along with some others. And the module 1 quiz, which is the one that you'll do at the end of today's session. And so you just jump in there and you go attempt quiz now, and there is 11 questions, and this one's just an admin item 1, but as you can see, you just go through and answer these questions. Shouldn't take you more than a few minutes, and today's recording will also appear here. There's the Mythbusters episode that you also mentioned earlier, and then the recording will appear here in a few hours' time. I think that's everything. Do we have any questions from anyone?
I think they're happy. That's good. So yeah, next session you'll be doing a little bit of work within the session, and we'll pick up there. Remember to log in 3 or 4 minutes early for a chance to win a prize. Kathy's always coming up with good trivia questions. So we'll see you on Thursday, is it? No.
Yeah. Friday.
Friday. My bad.
Yeah.
Friday, a little bit before start time, chance to win a prize.
Terrific. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone, for your participation.
Thanks. Bye.